What is going on, everybody? This is S Trades, and today's March 27th. And today we're going to be doing a quick trade recap and the two trades that I ended up taking. Today was very, very clean price action, and to be honest, this whole entire week was very, very clean. There hasn't been a single day that my strategy has lost yet in this week. And honestly, we've been printing, and there's a lot of lessons that could be learned today. And I'll be also doing a week recap, maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow, because, like I said earlier, my trading strategy has been working every single day this week and even for the last week. There hasn't been a single loss, and it's actually been pretty good with my win rate. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. So what happened today, right? As you guys can see, we had a massive dumpage today, right? Market kind of came up a little bit, it's the CBE of this wick, and then we ended up dumping for almost like 500, 400 points, right? So when I woke up, I was looking at this, I'm like, okay, I am most likely bearish, right? This is definitely something that I don't want to be long in, right? But there could be some mechanical longs or whatever. So, but for the most part, I was looking for shorts, right? And as for draws on liquidity, right? If you just go a little bit to the left, we have this very obvious draw on liquidity, which is a weekly low, right? So that's kind of what was my main draw on liquidity for the day was, right? So then I was like, okay, fine. Now, what do I want to see coming into the day, right? Pre-market, I want a price to go. Honestly, I want a price to come up here, right, to this 1 hour, and then kind of get a short from there, right? But this is again what I always preach, to pretty much react and not predict, right? Not it doesn't mean just because we haven't went up all the way here, we haven't went all the way back to the equilibrium on these like very premium high 1 hour fair value gaps. It doesn't necessarily mean that the trade is bad, right? As long as you're seeing confirmation from it, right? So what happened? So price kind of ended up coming up higher, right? We ended up kind of taking out all of this low resistance liquidity, right? This is exactly what I want to see, right? Price taking out low resistance liquidity, right? You do not ever want to have low resistance liquidity at your stops, because 90% of the time it will get ran through and you will lose. So in this scenario, right, price came up, took out all that low resistance liquidity, and then we just had a massive dump at open, right? We just dumped 135 points. I was like, okay, bet. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky, because here you could have taken some potential mechanical longs, right? But there was no entry for me, to be honest, because there was no higher time frame inversion, right? We had a 1 minute over here that ended up closing. Obviously it worked, but that was inside of a 2 minute, 3 minute over here, right? And then by the time we got anywhere, we also opened up a 5 minute, right? So at this point in time, right, although my higher time frame bias was bearish, right here I was down to take a long, right? In my head I was like, if we close above this 5 minute fair value gap, most likely we're gonna run through this high and potentially go up to this 1 hour fair value gap, because initially that's what I wanted to see, right? So but this is kind of where I made a mistake today. This was a little bit more a stupid trade. I don't ever take these kind of trades, but as you guys can see, this is my execution, right? My trader base right here. So what did I do wrong here, right? So we did have a pump up high, right? We are respecting somewhat of a bullish order flow just in this current leg, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna just continue going up higher, right? But my main point was that if we are bullish at this point in time, we need to close above this 5 minute. But I see a lot of people, what they do is they take that very high premium inversion for value gaps right next to internal highs, right? Because most likely if that fair value gap gets close through, it will most likely just run through it, right? Because that's kind of how price does things, right? So then for some reason, but me personally, I never do that. I always wait for the higher time frame. I never just take a lower time frame inversion inside of a very high and obvious inversion. But today was just the day, I guess, where I decided to try new things, which is honestly so stupid, right? So in this case, what I did, right, as this 1 minute ended up closing, right, I ended up slapping a long right here, just having a very slight top loss, and then I ended up targeting this high and then potentially the 1 hour high above us, right? Now, mind you, again, this 5 minute hasn't got closed yet. I just kind of assumed that the 5 minute would close because we're seeing a lot of displacement up higher. Again, this is not a good trade at all. This is something that you should avoid. I mean, unless that's your strategy, right? But for my strategy specifically, I don't do this, right? This is a worst, bad trade. Do not ever take these kind of trades. So, okay, whatever. I lost this, right? Now I'm like looking back, I'm like, okay, that was really stupid. I shouldn't have taken this. But then what do we see now? We've seen that the 5 minute ends up getting respected, right? We never ended up closing above it, and price starts dumping, right? Now we did have a 30-second inversion here, but I didn't have kind of time to react. So I was like, all right, what I'm waiting for now is, let me not delete this. I wanted to see the closure of this 1 minute Ferrari gap, right? And it also happened to be right next to this CISD right here. So this was double the confirmation, right? This is what I want to see when you're having inversions with CISDs. It's a very, very high and likely chance for it to play out, right? So boom, right here we get that CISD, we get that inversion. I just kind of slapped on a long right here, right? And stops was above over here. I didn't really necessarily need to see a pullback because this was a very, very aggressive reaction, and I didn't have enough confidence for price to go up all the way back up, right, to get that entry initially. So you could have also done, you could have set a limit right at this order block, but I just kind of market ordered in. And what I also did was, once I took this initial short, I also added in over here because we were super, super close to this internal low. And just like I said earlier, every single time price is very close next to internal highs and internal lows. If the drawn liquidity is correct and if your bias is correct, most of the time price will either just pump through that internal high or dump through that internal low, right? So in this scenario, this is kind of what I was expecting. Boom, I slapped on this short, I added a contract also, and then boom, we started to dump through this internal low, right? Now here is where things get a little bit complicated because I didn't want to take my, full position off over here because this would be like negative RR. And I did remember that we had this very obvious weekly low. So then I was like, okay, we're just gonna aggressively trail my stop and pretty much hold till this previous week low. This is exactly what I did. So price ended up taking out this low, right? So what I did then was obviously move my stops to break even, right? And afterwards, as each candle printed, I literally just kept trailing my stop loss because at any point in time I kind of had a feeling we might just go back up higher. But that is pretty much what I did, right? And so as price started going lower, right? So once we started dumping through here, I put my stop loss here, and then price ended up coming here, and I put my stop loss over here, right, afterwards. And then we got fully out right next to this area right here. And I didn't wait until the weekly low gets hit because I was already enough in profits for a payout. So I just took my trade off in here, right? And that was pretty much it, right? Price now is kind of about to consolidate because we took out a very important draw on liquidity. And yeah, that's about it. And before I say anything else, I just want to thank God for all this opportunity that I'm getting currently. Without God, without my religion, I wouldn't be here. I would not, have the opportunity to be trading. I wouldn't have the opportunity to be making a single dollar off of a goddamn computer pressing buttons, right? If you guys aren't religious, if you guys don't have that good relationship with God, I highly, highly suggest you guys get into a relationship with God. I promise you guys, even if you might seem like it's corny or whatever, trust me, guys, the number one thing that a lot of famous and a lot of profitable traders will tell you is they started seeing results as soon as they got their relationship with God developed, right? You could be Muslim, you Christian, whatever, right? Alhamdulillah, for me, I really, really started to see some changes as soon as I started getting closer to God, as soon as I started, praying more, asking more, started doing more good deeds and stuff like that, right? So again, if you guys have one key takeaway from this trade recap, it's a little different than usual, but develop that relationship with God. And even just psychologically thinking, even if you're not as religious, right, helps you to keep going, right? Like there's always this higher power in everybody's heads that is, has a lot more control over things, right? And again, like I said, if you're not religious, it's fine, but just trust me, you guys, develop that relationship with God. You guys are gonna see wonders. You guys are gonna start seeing results, and I'm very, very thankful for this opportunity. And yeah, that was about it for this trade recap. Like I said, I'm gonna be making a weekly recap later, maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow, because this week literally had so much sauce, and the trading strategy has been pretty much printing. So yeah. And if you guys have any questions, comment down below. Join my free Discord, watch my free bootcamp, and I will see you guys in the next video.